So we all have these emotions that come into our life that are less than desirable. We just don't like them. We wish they weren't there. So how do we get rid of those? Well, let's stop first and think that there are some emotions that we might be uncomfortable with, but might be emotions that we need to continue to have in our life, like grief. We may not want to have grief in our life, but truth is, when we think about our loved one who may have gone on, we wouldn't really want to feel anything else but grief or sadness because we've lost something. So there's some emotions that, though they be uncomfortable to us, are part of our life experience. And we want to just kind of flow with that and experience that. Grief is a great example of that. But there are emotions that we really don't want to have, and we would like to get rid of our life because those emotions may begin to cause us to act in ways that we might not otherwise act. And we would like to not only change the emotion, but change the behavior. So think about this. As we've said, thoughts create emotion. So if we can change the thought, the narrative, the story, then we can control the emotion. St. Paul said that we can experience a transformation by renewal of our mind. Jesus said, it will be unto you as you have believed. So as we believe, that's the experience that we have. So how do we change this? How do we get there? Well, the first thing is to instead of allowing the emotion to control us in kind of an automatic way, that is, when it wells up, it kind of takes over and we start acting out, is to begin to observe the emotion and observe the thought. So as we've said, the next time you have the emotion, instead of resisting the emotion and fighting with it, pause for a second, take a deep breath, and say to yourself, this is how it feels. This is that emotion. Sit with it a moment and observe it. Rather than identifying with the emotion, observe the emotion. And then begin to ask the question, what am I thinking right now? What thoughts am I having that are bringing about this emotion? That's when you'll start to hear the self-talk, the narrative inside the head, telling the story again. This happened, this person said that, this happened over here. Maybe there are things that you wish hadn't happened or wish would happen or whatever, fears about what might happen. All those things begin to go off in your head, right? These are the thoughts that are creating that emotion. So before we can do anything about the way that we feel, we first have to step back and observe it. Now, it's difficult to observe it when we're judging it. The moment we begin to judge the emotion, have a preference about it, then we start to move back into it again. Any kind of resistance to the emotion will draw you back into that emotion again. You'll start to feel it, it'll start to control you again. So this is kind of a thing we have to test on our own, in our own meditative time, in our own solace, our own time alone with God, to sit with the emotion, to be there with it, to be inside of it, to look at it. As you do this, so I tell you what, take a moment, start to look at the thoughts, move into the emotion, think about it, look at what you're thinking without judgment. Stop saying it shouldn't feel this way or I shouldn't feel this way. Instead, accept the fact that you do feel that way. It is there, and become the observer of it. Get to a place called free to be. Free to just be here the way it is. As you move into that place, I promise you, if you can find that place, you'll begin to be the observer. You'll feel a disidentification with what it is. Even if it's unpleasant, accept that it's unpleasant. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man who had been a very good football player. In his freshman year in high school, He broke all the state records for kickoff returns. That is, on the kickoff, he ran it all the way back 100 yards and scored a touchdown. He did this so many times that he broke the state record. But that following spring, after that first season, his freshman year, his older sister, whom he loved so dearly, OD'd on drugs and passed away. And this crushed him. He became angry, frustrated, even hostile about what had happened, hostile toward the drug dealers, the drugs themselves, his sister for using the drugs, and just the fact that it would happen to him. That next year, his sophomore year, he could hardly do anything in terms of running the football. He was a disaster. He even began to be hostile and angry with his own teammates and even his coaches, to the point that his coaches actually kicked him off the team the next spring. But one of his coaches had the wisdom to go to him and sit down with him and explain something to him. He said to this young man, look, I know you're angry, I know you're hostile, I know that all these feelings and emotions are welling up within you, but these feelings and emotions are nothing more than energy, a force. And if you could redirect that force, you'd be unstoppable. So he began to encourage the young man to do other things, to tell a story about his sister that was different than the story he was telling. Yes, it was a loss, and yes, it was a tragedy, but he began to go out and talk to young people in his community about drugs, tell the story of his sister, and began to put a memory to his sister that was more honorable. As he did this, that next year, his junior year, he began to break all of his own records. He took this hostility, this anger, this emotion, and he transmuted it. He changed it into something else by telling a different story. But he first had to become aware that he had the emotion, aware of what's going on. His coach helped him with that. And then he began to see that it was just energy and that the narrative could be changed. The story could be told differently. And he began telling that story differently. And as he did, the emotion changed. The judgment about the energy changed because the narrative around it was different. And suddenly the energy that he had was harnessed and used in a different way. Incredible, right? And that's exactly what you and I can do by being open. Jesus said something like this. He said, if you can recognize what's in front of you and accept it as it is, then what is hidden from you will be revealed to you. Oftentimes we've already drawn a conclusion about something. And because of that, that thought, that conclusion is causing us to feel a certain way, maybe envious, jealous, whatever. But because we don't have all the information, because we've made our judgment, we lose out on information that would come to us and change our mind, change the way we look at it. Maybe you've made a judgment about the universe in a way that you see the universe as a hostile thing. God is a hostile force against you. But to change your mind about it and begin to see the universe as something, as God, as a force that's working for you and not against you, you change your whole outlook. When your outlook changes, everything around us changes. As Jesus said, be it unto you as you have believed.